This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Nachum didn't want to go. It's interesting.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Bruchim Abam. Welcome back. So Parshas Beshalach, Leil Shishi Shiur. So the Parsha begins. Vayihi Beshalach Paro Yesa'am. It was when Paro was sending the nation. V'lo nacham Elokim derech Eretz Plishtim. God did not lead them by the way of the Philistines through Aza, Ki karoifu, because it was close. Literally, the word ki means because. The reason why Hashem did not lead them in the way of the Philistines is because it was close. Why? Ki amar Elokim, because Elokim said, Pen yinachim, maybe the nation will change their mind. V'roisam milchama, when they see war. V'shavu Mitzrayma, meaning the people might get scared off and they're going to go back to Mitzrayim. So if they take the straight route, they'll have easy access of return. I'll take them the circuitous route. This way, they won't have an opportunity to return if they see war. So according to Rashi's Pshat, Ki karoifu means because it was close. The Dasakenim of the Balei HaTosfos has an incredible Pshat in this pasuk. V'leinacham Elokim derech Eretz Plishtim ki karoifu, because it was close. Zok Tosfos ki karoiv koloimar ha'am karoiv shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The nation is a karoiv of God. We're close to God. We're related to God. Shenemar, how do we know that we are mamish related to Hashem? It's not just that Hashem's our creator, Hashem's our guide, Hashem is our manhig. No, Hashem is related to us. Shenemar, we say in Tehillim, we say it every morning, L'vnei Yisrael am karoivai, to the Bnei Yisrael, his close nation, Ulakach, and therefore, Lo Yenhigam Kiminhagay Shalaylam. He did not guide them like Minhag Shalaylam. So Hashem, if we would have been just His people or strangers, Hashem would have done the normal thing. This is what you do for everybody, even for people that for anybody, in a typical situation, Hashem would have guided us in the straight path. But we're not a typical people. We have a special relationship we have with Hashem. And because we're so close to Hashem, that we're mamish related to Hashem, therefore Hashem took us like a VIP access. Hashem didn't want to guide us that's the way everybody else does it. But somebody who has a special relationship, you give them VIP access. So what did Hashem do? He took us in a special route, which is a little bit difficult. If what everybody else would have done would be the circuitous route, and Hashem would have taken us the direct route, so then I get it. Ki karoifu. The reason Hashem took us the direct route is because we're related to Hashem. We're special people. We have a special relationship. But here, everybody else would have gotten a more direct route, and because Klal Yisrael is related, we got some fardarbana route. I mean, like they say, with relatives like that, who needs enemies? I mean, what's the explanation over here? Ki karoifu, Hashem gave us, I understand it's a special way, but it's like, it's a little bit too special. Something a little bit too special about it. I understand we want special treatment, but not, fardarbana treatment. Hashem made us wander in the desert for 40 years through a Yamsuf. Ki karoiv, because we're related? What's the connection between being related and the particular route that Hashem took us in? Okay. Very interesting Indian over here. So we have over here, Uparoi Hikrev. Paroi came close. Vayisu b'nei Yisrael seineim, the b'nei Yisrael lifted their eyes. V'hinei Mitzrayim noiseya achareim, and Mitzrayim was traveling after them. So Rashi, what do you mean Mitzrayim? It should say the Mitzrayim, the Egyptians. What do you mean the Egypt was traveling? So Rashi says the angel of Egypt was following after them. Vayiru ma'oi, they were very afraid. Vayitzaku b'nei Yisrael Hashem, and the b'nei Yisrael cried out to Hashem. Now, in the words Vayitzaku b'nei Yisrael Hashem, we know that Rashi's derech in Chumash is, Rashi tells us in Bereshis, Parag Gimel Pasuk Ches, Va'ani loibasi ela l'pshuta shel mikra. My tafkid in my commentary is just to say the simple interpretation of the psukim. And we all know that Rashi only says explanation if there's a difficulty. If there's no difficulty, Rashi is not the art scroll, Rashi is not even Cincino or Judaic Press or whatever additions there are. Rashi is a mafaresh that is addressing a particular difficulty. You look in all the mafarshim, be it the Goraryeh, be it the Sifsei Chachamim, be it any of the Perushim on Rashi, they'll always explain what is Rashi bothered by. There has to be a question that Rashi is addressing. The one words that don't need any explanation are the words Vayitzaku b'nei Yisrael Hashem. The b'nei Yisrael cried out to Hashem. What elucidation is needed? What is difficult? What would need to be explained? They cried out to Hashem. They're in a very difficult predicament. Their backs are up against the wall. So what are you going to do when the going gets rough? You daven. Says Rashi, Vayitzaku tafsu umanos avoisam. They chapped on, they grabbed the profession of their forefathers. What was the profession of the forefathers? By Abraham it says, El Hamakam Asher Amad Sham, Abraham daven in the place that he stood. By Yitzchak it says, Lasuach Basadeh, to pray in the field. By Yaakov it says, Vayifka b'makom, he entreated. So we know the common trademark profession of the Avos. What did the Avos do for a living? What was their umanos? They davened. So under the circumstances, what did Bnei Yisrael do now? Vayitzaku, they grabbed the umanos of their forefathers. They mimicked, they copied what their forefathers did. Very nice. Question is, what's Rashi talking about? What's Rashi bothered by? Why does Rashi feel a need to say anything? And what's Rashi explaining? Like what is missing here, and what is Rashi adding? You have the right to ask on a Rashi, okay, Rashi, what are you telling me that I didn't know without you? It says, Vayitzaku b'nei Yisrael Hashem, they cried out to Hashem. We all know what that means. We know what crying out means. We know what davening means. And if we don't know what it means, what has Rashi added to our understanding? Very interesting. There's, we know one of the famous commentaries on the Mishnah is the Bar Tanura. Ravad Yemi Bar Tanura. Ravad Yemi Bar Tanura also wrote a commentary on Chumash, on Rashi, called Amar Nekeh. Amar Nekeh. So it's interesting, I had this chus this past Monday. Past Monday was the Hakamas Matseva of my grandmother, Alaa Shalom. So after that, we took a tour for whatever amount of time we had on Har HaZeisim. The Kfarim on Har HaZeisim are Mamish Lo Yu'uman Ki Yisupar, who's buried on Har HaZeisim. Nevi'im, Zechariah, Chagai, Zechariah, Malachi. You have Mikubalim. We started sort of toward the top. We saw Rabbi Yehuda Fataya, one of the great mystics. If you remember, we had a shiur on the Sefer Chemdas Hayamim. Rabbi Yehuda Fataya is the one who had the dream that the Chemdas Hayamim was written by Nathan of Gaza. And we moved down, we saw Kever, Rav Victor Miller was there, and we saw Rav Shmuel of Salant, Rav Zundel of Salant, Rav Itzla Petterberg. We saw Rav Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, Rav Avram Shag, Rav Kook was buried there, and the Nazir is buried there, Alter Slabodka, Rav Hutner, V'chahina, the Rashash, the Archaim HaKadosh, the Pri Chadash. Unfortunately, one of the Kfarim that we missed was the Bar Tanura. The Bar Tanura is also buried over there, but Lo Zachinu to see, but they write, that if a person can't go to Meiron on Lag BaOmer, so you learn the Torah of the Rashbi, and when you learn someone's Torah, it's like their Matseva. It's even better. So here we have even better. We have the Torah of the Bar Tanura. So Bar Tanura asks, Kasha, Ma Mashmiyanu Rashi? What's Rashi teaching me? Ba'amra izeh, when he says this. Uma kashaloi. What was difficult to him? Shehutzach loymar zeh, that he needed to say it. Says the Bar Tanura, yesh loymar. Lefi shekosav achar kach. After the psukim, it says like this. After this pasuk that they daven to Hashem, you know what it says? Vayoymru el Moshe hamibli ein kfarim b'Mitzrayim lekachtzonu lomos b'midbar. What, they didn't have enough graves in Egypt that you took us to die in the desert? You wanted us to save money? What, the kfarim in Egypt were so expensive, you wanted to get a wholesale burial? So what do we see from that? What were Bnei Yisrael doing when they said hamibli ein kfarim b'Mitzrayim? They were complaining. Apparently, they were not on such a high madrega. That implies they complained, and they weren't righteous. Likewise, in Tehillim we read, Vayamru al Yam b'Yamsuf. They rebelled at the Yam. So therefore we have a problem. Because here it says they davened. But very soon after, we're going to learn about all their complaints and all of their kvetching and all of their accusations against Hashem. So soon we're going to see they were on a low level. So what Rashi is bothered by is that Yitzaku cannot mean genuine tefillah. If it was genuine tefillah, then they wouldn't have been complaining so soon after. So you know what it means? Tafsu umanus havoisam. Tafsu umanus havoisam means the kach pirush. Therefore Rashi explains Mashakasa vayitzaku b'nei Yisrael. Rashi explains that which it says Bnei Yisrael cried out, Loi b'shivchan dibar akasov. The pasuk's not praising the Bnei Yisrael that they davened. The pasuk is criticizing the way the Bnei Yisrael davened. Ela adarabba b'gnusan. It's talking about their disparagement. Shema shetzoaku, that which they cried out, Loi haya b'leiv shalem. It wasn't real davening, but what was it? It was what they say. You know, people say, Mina gavoisaini biyadaini. When somebody says that, you know what kind of madrega they're on. Minagav biyadaini means, this is not my thing. I'm not really that interested. That's what the Tata did, so I also do it. Loi b'shivchan dibar akasav. Ki minagav biyadim. In other words, you know what their tefillah was? They're not interested. What?
Stop streaming.
Stop streaming? Are we recording? I don't need to daven. It's not my tefillah. This is not my thing. This is not what I enjoy doing. It's not that meaningful to me. But this is what they did in the Altaheim. What? Yeah, they were just mimicking what their parents did. They were copying, right?
It was a complaint, actually complaining.
Tafsu, in other words, tafsu manus avoysameh means they weren't doing it genuinely. They were just copying what their forefathers did. Veroya. You want to say umanus means it's just a profession, just an act. V'roya davar zeh. The what?
Modern Hebrew means artwork.
Yeah, umanus is a craft, right? V'roya davar zeh. And the Rashi sees this in Mashakasav, B'nei Yisrael. Why does it say Vayisaku B'nei Yisrael el Hashem? Shelo hayitzach lichtav ela Vayitzaku el Hashem. Should just say they cried out to Hashem. Why does it say Vayisaku B'nei Yisrael? Who else are we talking about? What else is it? Why does it have to say Vayisaku B'nei Yisrael Hashem? What would I think? Vayisaku North Koreans el Hashem. We know what we're talking about. Elo Shabbat lahashmiyanu, it's coming to teach. Shema shetzoaku, that which they cried out was only because they were B'nei Yisrael. This is what the Tata did, so this is what I'm doing. I don't really care to do it. It's not really that meaningful to me, but I'm just keeping up an old family tradition. It's a minhag avosayni biyadayni. So meaning we're criticizing them. If someone only does something, why do you do it? I don't know. And that's what they did in the Altaheim. Yeah, but why are you doing it? You're not in the Altaheim. You're, 2018. If the only reason you're doing it is because that's what they used to do, so it's a criticism. It's an empty act. It doesn't really have meaning, especially when it comes to tefillah. If the only reason you're davening is you're mimicking what you saw, that's an accusation. Yeah, the Torah is accusing the Bnei Yisrael of serving Hashem in a very empty way. I asked the Bartanura, V'yafal pi shama Rashi l'kaman, even though Rashi says later that the Zechus Avos and the Amunah that you believed in me was enough to save you from Mitzrayim. It wasn't talking about the Amunah they displayed on the Yam Suf, or rather the Amunah they displayed when they left Mitzrayim before. So it's amazing Bartanura. We would have read Rashi, Tafsu Manus Avoisam. We would have read it as a compliment. We would have read it, the Torah is speaking about the Shvacha, the Bnei Yisrael, that they're following Messiah Ha'avos, and they're following traditions of their ancestors. And the Bartanura is learning Rashi that the Torah is criticizing the Bnei Yisrael, that their act of tefillah was a shell. It didn't really have meaning. It was just mimicking what they saw. Does anybody else learn Rashi this way? Yeah, the Maral. The Maral says the exact same thing. The Maral says, Tafsu umanus avoisam. Says the Gur Aryeh, don't say they cried out like the righteous, Shehim Sayakim is Sarah, who cry out at a time of distress. Because really they were complaining now. Better we should go back to Egypt. Rather, they were not crying out wholeheartedly. Ella shehu manus avoisam. It was just the profession of their forefathers. Shekach haya minhag avoisam. V'davar shu minhag avoisam nimshach ha'adam tamid achrav. Human nature is people like to do what their fathers do. no matter what. Even though they don't really do it with kavana or with feeling, but it's just something that people do. People happen to keep the same practices as a parent, not only religious practices. Many people like the same foods their parents like. Many people like the same type of entertainment. There's a human phenomenon that people like just to do what their parents did. People whose parents were cheap, they're going to be cheap. Even if they have a lot of people whose parents are generous, there's a lot of a person's activities are just mimicking their parents, and religiously as well. Like the Gemara even says, Goyim and Chutz La'aretz, they don't really serve Avodah Zarah, but the Gemara says, Minhag Avosayim b'yodeihem. So you can say, Baruch Hashem, they keep the Messiah, Minhag Avosayim. No, the Gemara is just saying that there is a phenomenon that when people do things without thinking, usually it's because it's what their parents did. And if that's the only reason they're doing it, says the Torah, that's empty. It's not really valuable. Okay, so let's develop this idea. Mar Rabbi, if I were to ask you, who is closer to Hashem? Someone who grew up religious, or someone who is a newcomer, a Baal Tshuva? Who is karov to Hashem? So most people would say, I don't know, this guy, he grew up, his father was saying over Reb Chaim while he was eating his frosted flakes. I mean, it's in his blood, it's in his DNA, Torah, Tefillah, Chesed, it's in his blood. This other guy, he could barely pronounce the words of Shemona Esrei correctly. His father doesn't even know the FFBs. This guy is not as close as HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But what's very interesting is that if you look in the Navi has a very powerful term for someone who is from birth, as opposed to someone who is a Baal Tshuva. That is true, but the Talmud Devar doesn't say that. It's a Gemara. It's a Gemara. Yeah. So let's see. The Navi Yeshaya says, look at number 7. The Navi Yeshaya says, Parak Lamed Gimel, Pasuk Yud Gimel. Shimu rechaykim asher asisi. Listen, you distant ones, what I did. Udeu kroivim gvurasi. And let the kroivim know my might. So the Pasuk is talking about rechaykim, and it's talking about kroivim. Who are the rechaykim, and who are the kroivim? Says Rashi, listen to a Rashi. Rechaykim, you know who the rechaykim are? Hamaminim bi, those who believe in me. V'oisim ritzoni minurayim, those who have fulfilled my will from the time they're young. You know what they are? Rachayk, they're far from me. Kroivim, you know who's close to me? Balei tshuva, sheneskarvo elai mechadash, they came close to me recently. So you'll say, so what's Rashi saying? That a rachayk is someone who developed his relationship with Hashem a long time ago. So really, he's far from Hashem, because we know that the feelings of affection you feel to somebody, they wane after time. So somebody grew up close to Hashem, he's rachayk from Hashem, he's far from Hashem. The Navi is saying someone who grew up as a mammon is far from Hashem. Someone who is a Baal Tshuva is karov to Hashem. Is karov to Hashem. I would like to humbly suggest then that if in the terminology of Tanakh, a rachayk is someone who grew up from, and a karov is someone who's a Baal Tshuva, then in the beginning of the Parsha, when the Torah says, Vayhi Beshalach Paro is someone, Paro sent other people, V'loi Nacham Elokim, God did not guide them, Derech Eretz Plishtim. You know why? Ki karov hu. God wanted us to become a karov. God wasn't interested in us until now. You know why we served Hashem? Because Abraham believed in Hashem, and Yitzchak believed in Hashem, and Yaakov believed in Hashem. And what about us? We were a bunch of fakers. We were a bunch of FFBs. We were a bunch of from Brooklyns, as they say. That's what we were, right? We had no personal connection to Hashem. You'll say, what's the chus that Klal Yisrael have when they left Mitzrayim? None! You know what they did? Shaloi shinu es malbusham. They wore the garments of the Altahaim. Shaloi shinu es lashoinam. They spoke the Mamalashon. Right? Shaloi shinu es shemam. They had the Haimish Numen. All empty nothings. Hashem says, garbage. I'm not interested in that. V'haraya, Rav Moshe writes in a tshuva, after the Torah was given, you don't have to have a Jewish name. Rav Moshe says that. You know why? Because you have Torah, you have the meat and potatoes, you don't need the Haimish trappings. Rav Moshe writes. Ribbon Shalom said, I don't want you being Bnei Yisrael, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, FFBs. Doesn't do anything for me. You know what an FFB is? Rachaik. What I want is Kikaraifu. I want you to be close to me. So what's happening? The Bnei Yisrael, they're crossing the Yam Suf. Vayitzaku el Hashem, Rashi says, garbage. Tafsu manas avaisam. That's not davening. Well, basically, because you remember, in the Altahaim, the Tata came into the shul, and he wound himself up to produce 97 shekels that it takes Ushmana Esrei, 4 bowings and 2 claps. And that's it. And you're doing the same thing. So very nice. You have the langa, you have the nice begadim, you have the nice name, and you have nice lashonos, and it's all empty outside shell. I'm not interested in that, says Rabbi Sham. Vayhi Beshalach Parshas, don't give me Vayitzaku Tafsu Manas Avoisam. You know what we're trying to accomplish now? What we're trying to accomplish now is Kikarefu. I don't want you to be a rachaik, somebody who believed in me from your youth. I'm not interested in you as Bnei Yisrael. You need to develop your own relationship to Hashem. You need to come to shul in the morning because that's what you want to do. Not because your Elta Zayda in the 1800s went to the shtibel, and now what are you going to do? You know, you say, I have to do it because what are they going to think of me if I don't follow follow Haimish practices? I don't care about that. I want Kikarov. You need to serve me because this is what you want to do. This is meaningful to you. This is your personal decision. So now the question is, did Bnei Yisrael reach this madrega? After all, according to the way we're learning here, the entire goal of Kriyas Yamsuf is to produce kroivim and not rachaikim. So I think, yes, ultimately, when Klal Yisrael reached the pinnacle of the objective of Kriyas Yamsuf, they finally reached that madrega. How do I know that? Look at number 9. It's a good thing there are not too many people here tonight, because this is a tough pill to swallow. Says the pasuk, Azi v'zimras ka, my strength and the praise of Hashem, v'yihili Yeshua, zeh Keli v'yanveu, this is my God and I will glorify Him. Eloi Avi, the God of my father, v'aroi memenu. Says Rashi, b'chvoidoi nigla aleim, God revealed Himself to them in His honor. V'hayumarin oisoi be'etzva, and they would point at Him with their finger. Ra'asa shivcha alayam, a maidservant saw at the sea, mashleiro neviim, what the neviim did not see. Interesting. The first madrega listed is Zeh Keli, this is my God, and then Elokei Avi. The Vilna Gaon wants to know, how do we know that a shivcha saw alayama shaloiro neviim? Maybe just an average Jew saw, but how do you know even a shivcha? I mean, where do you see anything about cleaning ladies in the pasuk? You know, did you ever see anywhere else in the Torah? Chazal say, oh, you see this level of Klal Yisrael? Even a shivcha reached that level. Mehechi Tesi, we don't find anywhere, Mamish and Kala Terakula, that Chazal say, oh, from here we see not only Bnei Yisrael, but even a shivcha. How do you say anything about a shivcha? It says, Az Yasher Moshe V'nei Yisrael. It doesn't say anything about a shivcha. Says the Vilna Gaon, and by the way, this is also published in the Psicha to the Shaas HaTshuvas Chud HaMeshulash in Ois Lamitas. Now, what is Chud HaMeshulash? A very interesting sefer. Chud HaMeshulash are the Tshuvas of Reb Chaim Volozhiner. It's interesting, I happen to have seen recently, I just came across it on the plane. One of the Gedolim that I visited was the Rav of Ezra's Torah, Rabbi Chiel Michal Stern. Chiel Michal Stern was the son of Rav Moshe Aaron Stern, the Mashgiach of Kamenetz. He is probably the most prolific author today. He told me, 104 Sfarim. I asked him, how does he do it? What's the secret? He said, if you don't waste time, there's time for everything. But Bekitzer, so what svarim that people know of did he write? He wrote 2 volumes called Oitzer HaYediyos. He wrote 3 volumes Gedolei HaDoros. He wrote 2 volumes Eishes Chayil, all the women in Tanakh and Gemara. He wrote Seder Tana v'Amaram, the history of the Amaram. He wrote Gedolei Olam, and he wrote probably his most famous work is the Arba Minim. You ever see the book with the pictures of the Daled Minim? That's his sefer. He was the first to write a sefer with pictures of Daled Minim. He's considered the biggest baki in Hilchos Daled Minim. So he wrote a biography about Rabbi Ovadia Yosef. He also has, this is what it seems like, an extensive collection of Gedolim pictures. Because I opened up the sefer, I bought the sefer from him. It was a biography on Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, and he has pictures like you never saw before. I said, "Where'd you get these pictures?" He says, "I have them." I said, "Where did the Rabbi get?" He said, "I spent a lot of money on them." I think he has a pretty big collection. Anyway, so he writes about Rabbi Ovadia that on a certain issue, Rabbi Ovadia was meikol against the Chazon Ish. That Rabbi Ovadia holds that if you have 2 roivs, you can matter an aguna. Chazon Ish was machmer. So he went to Rabbi Ovadia and said, how could you be lenient against the Chazon Ish? Chazon Ish is machmer. So Rabbi Ovadia said a tremendous thing. He said the reason the Chazon Ish is machmer, Chazon Ish is not a poisik. He's writing a perush on Shulchan Aruch. So people are not coming to him with the shilas. So objectively, maybe he could be machmer. But says Rav Ovadia, I'm a poisek. People are coming to me with the shaila. I have the oil of the psak on my shoulders. I have the people's problems resting on me. If the Chazon Ish was in my seat, avada he would be meikol, says Rav Ovadia. And how could Rav Ovadia say that? I mean, how can you say that? You're saying that the Chazon Ish only wrote it because he didn't have, nobody was pressing him, and if people would be coming to Chazon Ish, he would meikol. So Rav Ovadia said, if you look in Shal Sechuvas Chud HaMeshulash, Rav Chaim Volozhiner writes in defense of himself that he's meikol on a certain inyan, that other poskim are machmer, that Rav Chaim Volozhiner writes, you're machmer because you're just a loimed, you're just learning. But if you would have the oil of Rabbanis on your shoulders, you would have been meikol as I am. Anyway, the Vilna Gaon and Rav Chaim Volozhiner say like this. They say that there's a halacha that a ger is maybe bikurim, but a ger cannot be koreh the Parsha bikurim. Why can't a ger be koreh the Parsha bikurim? Because when you read the Parsha bikurim, you say what? You say lavoiseinu, and a ger cannot say lavoiseinu. So from here we see that there are certain things that don't apply to a ger or a shivcha. And that is the concept of saying forefathers. There's even a shaila, could a ger say Shemana Esrei, like Kainu v'lekei saying? We say yes, L'maisa ger could say Shemana Esrei, but it cannot be Karei Bikurim. So says the Gra, Chazal look at this pasuk, and they have a problem. What's the problem? And the problem is, at first, it says Zakeli, my God, and then it says Elikei Avi, my father's God. Why in the beginning is it my God, and only after that it's my father's God? Must be that the beginning of the pasuk is talking about people that are not able to say my father's God. Who's not able to say my father's God? Shivcha. And then the end of the pasuk are those who are even able to say also my father's God. Who's that? The rest of the Jewish people. That means the Shivcha said Zakeli. So from here we learn Ra Shivcha Layam Ashlei Ra Hanavim. Because if it's talking about the whole thing is going on Klal Yisrael, it should have first said Zeh Elekei Aviv Aram Imenu V'Zeh Keli V'Yanveyu. Why does it start with Zeh Keli? Says the Vilna Gaon, says Rav Chaim Volozhiner, it's because it's talking about 2 categories of people. It's talking about the people who are not able to say Lekei Avi, and that is the Shivcha, the Gerim. And from there we see they were able to point with their fingers and see Hashem in a way that nobody else was able to see. But perhaps we could explain this in the following way. If the whole objective of Kriyas Yamsuf is that why Hashem didn't take us in a regular route? If Hashem would have taken us in a regular route, guess what would have happened? We would have continued to wear our big day Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. We would have continued to speak the Lashon of Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. We would have continued to maintain our names. And we would have gone straight into Eretz Yisrael, and we never would have went through an experience that would have changed us and our relationship with Hashem. We would have remained rachik from Hashem, FFBs. But Hashem begins the Parsha. I'm not letting you through Derech Eretz Plishtim, ki karoifu. I want you to be more than FFB. I want you to be a BT. I want you to come close to me on your own, have your own relationship with me. Avada, by the way, it's like emunah pshuta. Rav Miller used to say, emunah pshuta is an excuse to do nothing. If a person never heightens and deepens their own personal emunah in Hashem, then they say, emunah pshuta. That means you're not interested in thinking about anything. Avada, emunah pshuta, is like a safety latch, that we have to have emunah pshuta. That no matter what, even if a person has questions or things that they don't quite understand, the emunah pshuta is like the basis, the safety latch. It's the same thing with avodas Hashem. Minog avosaini biyadaini, as they say, is a wonderful safety latch. It's what we call, when all else fails, and it's important to have. You can't just rely on your own relationship with Hashem. But it's not the ikar. The ikar is not minog avosaini biyadainu. The ikar is not zoifirt in the Altaheim. That's meaningless Judaism, if you're just copying and imitating what was. It's a nice thing to do, but it's a safety latch. It's the bottom rung. What the rung that Hashem is waiting for is to climb to the madrega of being a Baal Tshuva. Like the story goes, somebody once went to the Ger Rebbe. Ger Rebbe said, "Know where you're learning?" He said, "I'm learning in Or Sameach, but don't worry, I'm not a Baal Tshuva." And the Ger Rebbe said, "No, in fact, was nicht. Why not about tshuva? Why not?" So that's what the Rebbe wants from us. So we're going through the Yam, and we're crying, "Everybody, Shalom! Anini Hashem Anini." Ana Hashem Hashiana. Hashem said, "Get lost, fakers. I'm not interested in that. That's what you're just imitating. I want you to see me and say, not only Elekei Avi V'Aram Imenu. I want you to reach the madrega for first say Zekeli. First you're going to daven." You could tell the difference between a guy who's serving Hashem as Zekeli and the guy who's serving Hashem Elekei Avi V'Aram Imenu. Very few people have avodas Hashem of the madrega of Elekei Avi V'Aram Imenu in a very meaningful way. Yeah, they do. You could tell by the time that a person comes to davening whether they're on a madrega of Zekeli or Elekei Avi. You could tell by a person's entire conduct in life. Is it only because that's what was done, or this is what's meaningful to me? And that was the objective of Kriyas Yam Suf, and it was something that Bnei Yisrael did accomplish. It's something that Bnei Yisrael did achieve, and that the whole purpose was kikarefu, that we elevated ourselves from being a rachaik, from being from birth, to being Bnei Yisrael, just Bnei Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, to our own acquired and independent avodah of Hashem. Just to end off, why in fact is somebody who grew up with avodas Hashem considered a rachaik? How is he rachaik? I mean, he's close to God. How is he far from God? Why is he called a rachaik? So look at number 13. I think it's very obvious. Vayomer Hashem, Yan ki nigash ha'amazeh, this nation approaches me, bepiv, with their mouth, uvesvasav, and their lips, kibduni, they honor me, v'liboy richak mimeni, their heart is far from me. They're not far from God, they're doing everything they need to do. But Rebbe Shalom said, I'm not interested in the externalities and the trappings, and the lashoinam, and the malbusham, and the shmam. Rachmano libaboy, I want your heart. And if a person doesn't have their own connection to Hashem, through their own understanding and why it's meaningful to them, then their heart is not close to Hashem. What is their avodas Hashem? Vati yirasa moisi mitzvas anoshim melumada. What's mitzvas anoshim melumada? They're a monkey. They're just trained like an animal to do what was done, instead of having their own appreciation of Hashem. That's why the Gemara says in Brachas, that the Torah quotes, Gemara in Brachas, Aflam Medalid, B'makom shabali tshuva oimdim, ein sadukim gemurim ein oimdim. That's the meaning. Why is a Baal Tshuva considered on a higher madrega? Because their lave is karev takadosh baruch hu. So that was the madrega that Klal Yisrael reached at the Kriyas Yamsuf. And every year we come to Parshas Beshalach. It's something that we all need to work on. Baruch Hashem, we have the opportunity to learn Torah. Many of us have been doing it from the time that we were young, and it's a very great privilege, and there are many benefits. However, the danger is that it gets stale, and the heart drifts from Hashem, and sort of the fact that we have all the trappings, in a way, distances us from Hashem, because we rely on that, and we're comfortable with that, and we feel self-satisfied with that. But we have to understand that the way we're learning Parshas Beshalach, the whole objective of this circuitous route that Hashem took us was to sort of shake us up and elevate us above the madrega of being a rachaik. And hopefully, b'siyata d'shmaya, by learning Parshas Beshalach, we should all become karoifu, close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Thank you very much. Have a good shkayach.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.